Hi everyone. So today we have with us Professor C. Raja Mohan. He is a contributing editor of the Indian Express. He has a weekly column with us called Raja Mandala, and he's at the National University at Singapore as well as director of their South Asia department. And we'll be doing this as a weekly thing. In this, based on his column, we'll ask him a few questions. So let's start. So the first thing, so this time in your column is obviously you've taken off from the Quad meeting, and China's reaction to it, as we saw and from the Global Times, which is a sort of government mouthpiece and it's a newspaper which has quite a bit of rancor and takes provocative positions, especially on foreign policy vis-a-vis India, vis-a-vis the US. What the Global Times has basically seemed to say, and how you put it in your piece, is that by moving closer to the US, particularly through the Quad, that is a sort of zero-sum game vis-a-vis BRICS and vis-a-vis China. Is there some merit in that? Is it an either-or situation? Do we have to make a choice? And the US, do you feel the right choice in this, in the sort of in our strategic calculus in the neighborhood and in the Indo-Pacific?
Look, I think it's really part of the Chinese somehow are more concerned about India's strategic autonomy than anybody else in the world, because for them it's become a useful stick to generate opposition to India's engagement with the US. Now, if you look at China's history, China had actually a war with America in 1950 to 53 during the Korean War. I mean, thousands of people died in China, including Mao Zedong's own son. 18 years later, they were cutting a deal with the Americans to balance the Chinese. Now, if you look at American military alliances, nobody's saying India has become an ally. After the Quad meeting, Americans said, look, this is not a military alliance. Japan has been a US military ally since the Second World War. South Korea, Taiwan, you have Southeast Asia, Philippines. Now, these alliances, these are military presence right on the border of China, facing China. That hasn't stopped China from having business with the Japanese. That hasn't stopped the Japanese from doing things to everyone else. Take, for example, Pakistan. Chinese say Pakistan is their all-weather friend, deeper than the Indian Ocean, higher than the Himalayas. But if any country in South Asia had a military alliance with the US, that is Pakistan. So did the US alliance with Pakistan stop China from doing business with Pakistan? So I think this is a propaganda exercise. And I think, unfortunately, many Indians who have been opposing India's rapprochement with the US have traditionally sought to use the strategic autonomy argument. So India is strategically autonomous, therefore we shouldn't have a good relationship. So I think what the column did was, look, there was a context in which the way the strategic autonomy argument evolved in the early 90s, where US was trying to, push India into solving the Kashmir question. It wanted to take away India's nuclear weapons program. That was the context in which India said, no, we have to be careful and we must keep some distance from the US. But over the last 30 years, things have dramatically improved between India and the US. No US government is saying, look, we want to solve Kashmir problem between India and Pakistan. The nuclear issue, which for 30, 40 years troubled the relationship, has been sorted out. Then you have on terrorism, the US supports India on cross-border terrorism. Well, China is the problem on all these core issues today. China takes the Kashmir question to the UN Security Council. China protects Pakistan from UN resolutions on terrorism. China has given nuclear weapons to Pakistan. So I think all these years, the Indian foreign policy establishment, if you will, or the discourse more broadly, was fudging this question and be pretending as if China, US are equal. Therefore, it's a question of balance. That applied okay between US and Russia, but China is our neighbor. We have boundary dispute with China. China is a party to the dispute on Kashmir. So I think as long as you have the bilateral disputes, to blame it on the US relationship as the problem it's just a diversion. That whatever you do, we have a boundary problem. Till we resolve that, the problems are there. There is no way you can fix that. A lot of Indians used to say, oh, America is trying to divide India and China. Really? Do they have to try hard to divide India and China? 70 odd years, we've been fighting on the boundary. Kashmir, China claims a part of Kashmir. So this idea of somehow it has taken root in India, that somehow it is US is trying to divide India and China, and India must keep distance from the US, otherwise we get China to be provoked. So I asked, look at the Chinese experience, how they dealt with Japan, how they dealt with Pakistan. So I think our focus must be look till we resolve our bilateral problems. All other fix, the finessing through BRICS, finessing through anti-imperialism, finessing through Asian solidarity, doesn't work because both of us are deeply nationalist. Both of us claim territory which others says no, it belongs to me. So there we are.
Right, sir. So, another sort of fear in certain circles in India and certain people looking at Indian foreign policy is that at the end of the day, China still has that basic economic, it is still a manufacturing power, despite how much has moved outside due to the pandemic. And that when push comes to shove, the fear is there is this distrust of the US and the Western powers, of Australia, for example, in the Quad, that China will eventually use its economic leverage and they will not, I mean, they'll be fair weather friends to India. Is there some merit in that? How do you see that criticism, this fear, insecurity about the US and this fear of China's using its economic muscle as a strategic leverage?
Look, I think we got to be realistic. Look, other countries have relationships. So it is not that, you kind of believe someone, look, they love you, that we're not in the business of love. And this is not about personal liking and disliking. Look, China and America were fighting, as I said, in the 50s. They become friends in the late, from the early 70s. Then, now they're again getting into trouble. So I think we have to calculate our interests. And I think that is what matters, and not get into this, will they make a deal? For example, on the 18th, Friday, US and Chinese are going to talk to each other. After all, they're two large economies. They're the largest economies in the world. They are going to engage each other. There's more business between them than between China and us, or between us and the Americans. So that's a reality. But what's happened in the last 2 years or 3 years under Trump, there is today, the China policy is also US domestic policy. China's supreme strength in the economic side. Now, Biden is saying China has undercut America's middle class. Manufacturing has gone out. Therefore, they need to create a situation where that they can push back the Chinese economic inflow into their country. It's exactly the argument Prime Minister Modi is making here. That our decision to walk out of the RCEP is the fact that China has China has taken unilateral advantage. So I think if you look at the Quad joint statement or the joint op-ed that the Secretary of State Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin have written in the Washington Post yesterday, they don't talk about trade. Even with India, I mean, all they talk about, security, Asia Pacific, democracy, etc. But there's no reference to trade because Biden's policy, I think, looks like a continuation of Trump's policy. That China's domination of the WTO, China's bending of the global economic rules has hurt America. They're going to try and fix it. And that's why they talk about industrial policy. So I think there are contradictions. It doesn't mean those contradictions are going to be resolved today or tomorrow. So we have to be aware of that. Just as if you're an American and ask, why is India sitting in the BRICS? Yeah. If you have territorial dispute, right in the middle of the dispute, we're still in with the. So I think everybody knows this is a real politic. Everyone has to deal with other large countries. And within that, what is the common ground we can find? Which is what we've tried with the Chinese last 30 years. But because they become so strong, they think they can take unilateral advantage on the trade, on the border, that they don't have to pay enough respect to India's interests. So that's the problem we are caught in. And I think India is trying to find a balance today. It has cut off trade links or trying to diversify from that. The Quad is saying that, look, we'll set up different technology standards. So I think we got to, as Deng Xiaoping said, look, we got to cross the river by feeling the stones. There is always other people. Other people have interests. So there are multiple sovereign actors in the international system, each doing his own thing. And if everyone was predictable, we could have an algorithm, then we don't need foreign offices. But the fact is, there is complexity, there are domestic politics. Within that, we have to maximize our interests, which I think is what we're trying to do with the Quad, I think, without giving up an engagement with China. while continuing to negotiate with them, while keeping your relationship with Russia. So I think there's a reasonable strategy, but we have to keep moving forward wherever we can.
How important has this Quad meeting? How seminal a moment is it? And what are the things to be cautious about as well moving forward for India?
Two things, because there's so much obsession in our discourse with a joint statement. A lot of people are complaining, look, Quad doesn't issue joint statements. So I was trying to say, look, just because the BRICS issued, November they met, it was a video conference where in Moscow, 11,000 words of joint statement. But, all the words there were not enough to solve your border problem. So I think the real question is there a convergent interest between countries when they meet? I think what I was saying about BRICS was, look, for all the declarations, thousands of words every year, multiple meetings, none of that can fix India-China boundary dispute and other issues that have emerged. Similarly, over the last 3 years, yes, they've met regularly, the Quad ministers, but they've not issued a statement. So I think this time they did issue a statement. And I think what it reflects at this point is two things. I think one, that everyone is finally agreed that China has overreached, that it has hit at people. The US has been its greatest supporter since the late 70s. Japan has given it the maximum possible assistance. Australia has been a major partner. India has for long, was willing to be so generous to a fault as far as China is concerned. But the assumption, the Chinese assumption that the rest of the world will not get together, they can deal with each one separately. So that confidence, that hubris, if you might say,
yeah.
I think this is what the statement is puncturing. Look, if we push us too hard, we can get together. And within the statement, I would say two things. So one, that it is now clear Quad is here to stay and will become the major foundation for the structuring of a new regional order. Second, but the four countries are saying, look, this does not mean we're looking for a military alliance. We want to do broader things which are of interest to everyone. So in some senses, they're making it easier for the rest of the region to collaborate with the Quad. Because as long as they said this is all about China, the rest of the region, look, they don't want to get into this fight between the Quad and the Chinese. So I think what the Quad has done is, look, this is not just about China. This is not about an anti-China coalition. We want to build, like with the vaccine initiative, a broader framework for regional cooperation so that everyone can benefit from the creation of a new institution in this part of the world. So I think by doing that, the Quad has given itself a longer term because it's seen as now something not anti-China, but it stands for collaboration, partnership in the region. And I think Quad countries will hope, because everyone has such high stakes in the relationship with China, that they would all like to see a China that is reasonable and more accommodative to everyone. And that's what the four countries will hope. But if it doesn't happen, like it happens, like every action has a reaction, and eventually it could become a balancing force.
There seems to be almost a hyper optimism. The Quad is sealed, is going to expand immediately to Southeast Asia and other littoral states in the Indo-Pacific, as well as this vaccine diplomacy, the acknowledgement of the role India has played. And we have this kind of manufacturing and distribution, we have a history of. It's not that this itself is going to be this is the beginning of India now becoming, replacing China as a sort of economic manufacturing powerhouse. How do you see that kind of? Do you think there is also sometimes a little too much optimism or too much rhetoric?
No, I think we swing from one extreme to the other extreme. Previously, nothing could be right with the Americans. The Chinese and the Russians could do no wrong. Now today we're swinging to the other extreme. Look, we have a long way to go in catching up with the Chinese economic power. China's economy is 5 times bigger than us. Chinese, defense spending is 4 times bigger than India's. So I think we're at the beginning of a process where Chinese have grown near double digits for almost 40 years before they became in my lifetime, from being a broken country in a civil war to the world's second most powerful nation. So what Chinese have shown us is it can be done, but it involves hard work. It involves a solid domestic consensus and the ability to focus on the national objectives. I think if we have those, we can get going. But I think this will be a long struggle for us to be focused on the larger national interest and to work together to be able to produce those high growth rates that will give you the national, comprehensive national power. So we have a long road. I would say it does take us 2-3 decades to get there. But I think it's just the beginning of the process. Do sensible partnerships, work with others, focus on internal unity and partnerships with whoever is willing to work with India.
Okay, great, sir. Thanks so much.